Alalle, 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 kulle, alalle, 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 alalle.
You heard that music, and you hear the sirens. I didn't do it. Wildlife conservation expert Adam Roberts is back on the show. We call him the compassionate conservationist, and he's back on Big Blend Radio today to talk about his recent visit to Tanzania as an advisor for the PAMS-foundation, which works to help sustain and conserve biodiversity, my favorite word, wilderness habitats, and the ecological processes through actions that benefit nature and communities. We're especially going to talk about their role in supporting various community conservation projects in Africa, especially for giraffes and elephants. We definitely got to talk about what's happening with this elephant reversal of the ban of bringing elephant parks and tusks into our country. I definitely want to talk about giraffes because it's horrifying what's happening to their numbers. So everybody, pams-foundation.org, this organization is doing some really cool things. So it's PAMS, pams-foundation.org. And you can listen to Adam's past Big Blend Radio interviews. Just go to our expert department on blendradioandtv.com. Adam, welcome back. How are you?
I'm very well. Thanks for having me. Good to hear you guys again.
Yeah, man,
it's like with you.
So wait a minute. Last time, you've been to Mexico, now Tanzania. It's been a busy year already.
Yeah.
Bebopping all over.
There's quite a lot going on, and it'll continue that way. Although I have to say, it's particularly tragic to go off to Tanzania, talk about wildlife conservation, especially focused on elephants and this ongoing assault all over Africa, and having China closing down their ivory markets and all of this movement globally, and then I come back and again just in the past couple of days find out that Trump once more is going to allow elephant trophies to come back into the country, and it's just it's hard not to be demoralized sometimes by it, but at this point we just kind of shake our heads and roll up our sleeves and get back to work, because we realize, and we'll talk about this today, that there's so much more that can be done globally. There are so many more conservation leaders, both foreign governments and people on the ground, that you can sort of withstand these moronic decisions that are happening at the U.S. government level right now because of everything else that's happening globally, and we have to focus on that quite a bit, I think.
Yeah, politics is politics, and I think it's really obvious in this particular administration. It's not the only one like this, but probably the most, outlandish, that it's pretty obvious that whatever happens right now has got nothing to do with anything other than ego and paying off favors. There's no real, I care about anything good for this country. There's no anything about I care about in the environment. I don't understand science at all, apparently. I mean, everything just seems like the worst decision that you could possibly imagine. There we go. As a country, we're going right there. And it's just something horrible we all have to live through until people get together and decide enough is enough.
Yeah, I think that's right, and you mentioned sort of paying off favors, and I always think about the special interests, right? Because for all of these years, I've been part of a special interest, right? I'm a special interest group. I happen to be a special interest that's involved in wildlife conservation and animal protection, but we are a lobbying effort, and we have clients and customers. Those happen to be animals. But with this one, if you read and listen to the news, it's been really interesting for me to try and dissect it all, because everyone keeps saying that Trump did this, allowing these trophies to potentially come in because of pressure from the NRA, and it's not really, to the best of my knowledge, the NRA. I mean, what does the NRA particularly care about elephant hunting? They care about gun rights, theoretically.
Right.
But this is hunting and the hunting heritage, and access to hunting globally is therefore a byproduct of the hunting rights and the gun rights that they so cherish. And I think when you have Safari Club putting pressure on Congress and the administration, and the NRA joining the Safari Club, you end up with this, fairly formidable lobbying arm that is focused on dismantling protections for cherished and imperiled species. So, it'll take some serious effort to try and mitigate this, I think, over time, simply because, conservationists certainly are widespread across this country, across the globe, but they don't necessarily have the same lobbying power as that 1-2 punch of Safari Club and NRA, especially with this administration. You've got a Secretary of Interior that's got hunting video games in the Interior building now, and obviously is dismantling our wildlands.
But I'd like to point out that we personally, as taxpayers, paid for that. I don't want to pay. Right. I'm sorry, I don't want to pay for video games for any politician ever.
But
I don't care about putting games in their break room.
But okay, so I don't understand, because I do understand, but I'm just I feel like everything's going away. Like, I feel like we're being raped as a natural world, and the more, it just feels like, okay, we can have pollution in rivers, we can kill things, we can now go and create a national park fund for maintenance by drilling the hell out of national park land and their gateways. I don't understand that, and it's like, oh, look at us, we're going to be doing this, but excuse me, sorry, but here's your money for your toilet for the park. That's been needed, by the way. Yeah. I know, and then. But to give you that toilet, we're going to take uranium outside of your park, and just destroy that and not have. This is what I think is so important about talking about community conservation, because it's so pertinent, key to parks, to animals. But these things, this elephant thing, we've done so many shows with you over the years on this, yes. Adam. I mean, we've had shows where, hey, don't import elephants from Swaziland to zoos in America. That's stupid, But then, whatever. But this, I remember when finally this thing happened, this ban on tusks and animal and elephant heads. Airplanes said no to it. No, we don't want this, and here it comes. And U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Fish and Game, whatever their name is now, I think we should call them Fish and Game again. When that happened, when they made these steps, when Fish and Game turned to Fish and Wildlife, all these changes were just being made in this amazing way, and it took a lot of work to get there. And then this suddenly happened over Thanksgiving. Wasn't this all started, these little sneaky little maneuvers, while we're all eating turkey? Not all of us, right, Adam? Tofurkey?
Tofurkey.
We didn't. Well, I don't want to go into that. But you know what I'm saying? Like, it goes into that. They do the holidays, and they sneak these bills.
At midnight.
Yeah, no one knows. And then here it is suddenly, but people didn't even understand what was going on. It was this sneaky little thing. But Trump says he didn't want this. And Zinke says he didn't want this. That didn't make sense. No, it doesn't. Yeah. His son hunts.
Yeah. No. Well, see, that's the fascinating thing about this specific issue of elephant trophies being imported back into the United States is, first of all, as you say, I thought we litigated this, right? We've been through this for years. Global ban on ivory. We know we need to protect elephants. Elephant populations across Africa depleted from 1.3 million to less than 600,000. And, we know the threats. We know the trade routes. We know the involvement of terrorist gangs and poaching. And we know the transshipment routes and where it's going. And we're cracking down on ivory trade. And we're closing down domestic ivory markets. There's all of this groundswell of activity. And then, Trump, who has called elephant trophy hunting a horror, decides, as you say, to allow trophy imports to come in from Zimbabwe and Tanzania, and then backtracks on it due to pressure, including conservative pressure and outspoken critics of the plan, and then randomly this week, back again. It's really interesting, and I guess, for this one, it will be incumbent upon all of us to be vigilant about this situation, because as best as I understand from what I've read thus far, as is so often the case, it's a very vague policy decision, right? It's going to be on a case-by-case basis. The administration will allow elephant trophy hunting trophies to come into the United States. And so what does that mean? Does that mean it could be from any country? It could be never. It could be in every instance. We really just don't know. And it does put a lot of pressure on the nonprofit organizations that will be monitoring the Federal Register every day, waiting to see permit application requests come in from hunters who want to bring back their trophies. And then on a case-by-case basis, we'll have an opportunity to fight those and say, here's why elephant trophies from that country, from Tanzania or Zambia or Mozambique or Zimbabwe or South Africa, should not come back into the United States, should not be brought back in. And we'll be able to fight those and litigate that once again, not in a lawsuit sense, litigate, but just prosecute the issue each time. Puts a lot of pressure on all of us to have to do that, but it does allow us the opportunity at least to weigh in. So it's another way that individuals can have a voice in trying to keep sound conservation policies in place, I think.
Thank you for saying that, because I think it's important that we take action. I mean, I can't even my blood just immediately boils every time I just look at that issue. But I just want to say I think it's so important that we do follow all the organizations, that stand up and do lawsuits against and do all that kind of work, do what you can, petitions, donations towards those lawsuits, all of those kinds of things. The other part too, Adam, we can share it on social media. We can use Twitter. If you don't like what's going on, you can use it to your representatives. Use Twitter. Use social media to your representatives, especially Twitter, because they can't delete that. Facebook, they can hide stuff and delete it. Twitter, use. I mean, that's apparently how our some people use that, so use the same thing and go for it and say, hello, you don't like it, and we can, as a national community, stand up. What about, Adam, things like California is making huge strides and making huge changes in things, saying, hey, in California, no, we're not doing this. I'm just using them as an example, because even on the climate agreement, they're going, hello, we're going to stand with Paris. We're going to stick to that agreement. Can states turn around and say, we won't let you into our state with this?
Yeah, absolutely. And there have been some states that have done that, New York and New Jersey, as I recall, among them, and California and others, where especially after Cecil the lion was killed, there were a number of states that enacted strong trophy hunting regulations to either say, we won't allow any trophy 5 or endangered species that are, protected on Appendix 1 of CITES. A lot of them looked into these issues. Some passed, some didn't pass. They had different metrics. Is it 10 different species, or is it just 2 or 5? But there is activity at the state level, and I think, as you rightly say, it's important. It's another way that we can have this more localized community involvement to say, look, we can only control things so much at the national or even international level. But in my state, whatever state that may be, wherever your listeners are, or wherever compassionate conservationists are around this country, they can work with the state legislature to say, look, we're not going to allow elephant tusks to come into our country, masquerading as trophies, ending up in commercial sale, putting a bounty on the head of every elephant in Africa. It's just not necessary. And again, we've litigated it before, so if we need to act at the state level, people can and should.
I think that's going to happen in our country anyway over the next couple of years, because we see, Washington just passed the state law. Basically, they don't like what the Trump administration did with net neutrality, so they went, that's okay, but not in our state. You guys suffer with internet that slows down, speeds up, and you pay more, but not in Washington. You see different states going, okay, I don't like your NRA, your gun law over here, so I'm going to change it over here in this state. Eventually, the states are going to end up with more power than the feds.
So we're going to become Europe.
Well, but I think we've historically done this. And different states will get together, and the states who believe in combating climate change will get together, and they'll pass the same kind of laws. And it'll be, well, you can do it over here, but you can't do it over there. Well, when you're looking at things like that, Okay, so you can't bring ivory in over here, but you can bring it in over there. But then, maybe you can't transport it even from that state out, even in a car, because if you go through border control, you might get caught. So eventually,
they don't have border patrol in other
they might
states
do,
like us.
but they might do.
Yeah, well, you have import like California, Arizona
so
agricultural laws.
Can you if you can take ivory into Arizona, but you can't take it into California, and you live in California, how are you going to get your ivory from Arizona to California? You see what I'm saying? So it's going to make a lot of more state laws to combat stupid federal laws. And then it'll go the other way when the administration changes to somebody else. Because the federal government will want their cojones back.
Wow. And okay, I say
what's really happening here is the dilution
well,
of
then
power.
the quickest mode is to petition the airlines.
Yeah, just boycott. If you're going to fly that, we won't fly your airline.
Exactly. You petition the people who transport it.
I mean, this is a time for the consumer to stand up. As far as I'm concerned, I am never going to compliment someone wearing a fur coat, ever. I am never going to compliment somebody with ivory tusks in their home. I'm never going to go, oh, man, that's a piece of jewelry that's so cool, made out of ivory. I will be disgusted, and I will most likely do what our cat used to do, is flick your tail, turn it around, and walk out of the room.
Okay.
So if you're not getting the ego charge out of owning animal parts, maybe you won't own them anymore.
Well, if I could just say one thing before you move on, that I find this conversation so interesting, and as I'm listening to you talk about all of these, sort of states' rights issues and how, the states can tell the feds to stop trying to tell them what to do because the feds are making stupid decisions. It's fascinating for me from a historical context, having been at this for a very long time, because I distinctly recall on so many issues that I was trying to fight in Congress on the animal side, on the animal protection side, the conservation side, the humane side, hearing that very same argument. And it's fascinating to think that we might be able to do a little bit of taking the states' rights argument back. So when I was lobbying in favor of, as we talked about, I think on my very first show so many years ago, trying to have a federal law prohibiting the interstate and international movement of bear gallbladders and bear bile, one of the big pushbacks was states' rights. The federal government shouldn't tell people in Idaho what they can and cannot do with bears that are killed in Idaho. And it was so often that's the case. States should be able to decide what trapping laws they have. States should be able to decide hunting laws. States should be able to decide how they commercialize wildlife parts and products. And now we might be able to turn that tide a little bit and turn that same argument back and say, okay, so if the federal government, through Donald Trump and the Department of the Interior, is going to say, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, wherever, send trophy imports in from elephants, the states can say, you know what? No, you can't tell us what to do. We have a right to prohibit those products from coming into our country or our state. Excuse me. Yeah.
No, this is amazing.
It's crazy. I mean, the whole thing is nuts.
Listen, you got to use what you got.
Yeah. So if you can't do it this way, you got to do it the other way.
But I think also the business, the corporate side, because we are looking at a world that's changing. I mean, even oil companies are saying, "Sorry, we've already started making changes. We're not going backwards. Thank you very much." So we do have some morals happening. There are companies that are good, and I think. Especially last time you were on the show talking about Anamandil, if I'm saying that correctly yet, we were talking about, tourism groups not, going, hey, now let's put you on an elephant's back. And, things like that. Let's go to Sri Lanka and do that for fun. Or, the things that aren't cool in tourism, like go swim with dolphins in the Bahamas and put your suntan lotion all over them. So those kind of things, don't do that. It's not cool. And that most travelers don't actually want to do that. And then there's the other side that don't understand the perils of it. So when you look at that organization and what they're doing, I think the air transportation is key because that's the same. It's the same battle in a way. Whether I know poaching is. I mean, that's deadly, but it's all deadly to animals. And eventually, people can't go on safari to Africa if you kill the animals. There you go.
Right.
You can go to Africa and go look at all the trees that aren't living because you killed the animals that actually are part of the trees. You'll have a big dust bowl when you go there. And that's exactly what happens. And so if you want to go on safari, protect what you want to see.
I just find it really interesting in this day and age where we have the ability to photograph with even a phone, that someone has to kill something and bring the head back home and put something that they demolished on their wall and be proud of it. Because first of all, I can't see what you're proud of, because I'm pretty sure you didn't just walk up and slap an elephant. I think that you probably were hiding in the bushes somewhere with a rifle that was you're way far away. I mean, there's nothing to be proud of. So all I would say is for people, if the general public would turn and just stop it.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, and when somebody goes, oh, look, I have this head, oh, look at this elephant I killed, then shame on you.
Yeah, Facebook does a lot. People shame
you.
them.
It should be shame on you, not you're a great, brave person, because we all know that you're not.
And half the time you're not the one who pulled the trigger.
Yeah, we also know that. Having lived in Africa 9 times out of 10, it's the African guide who actually shoots the animal after you injure it.
Okay, so that brings me to my segue of going to community conservation, because I'm looking at America and
we're getting really hot and bothered now.
I know. But this is one thing is communities, we can do that. We all have our communities of friends and family, social media, et cetera. And so we can take action that way. And then there's also communities, and this is a huge part when you brought this up to me as a topic, Adam. This is exactly everything that we fight for as a company, as travelers. The whole thing, our Tourism and Excellence series that we've started, is putting the eye back into community, and that you have to be part of your community, and it's connected with tourism, responsible, sustainable tourism. You can't invite people into your community if your community is, it's not a healthy community, right? And so there's that balance. Yours is about looking at community conservation. We look at take care of your parks. If you're outside of your community, if a park is clean, then you're not off-gassing into the park. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So with yours, we talk about wildlife conservation. There's a buffer system they're trying to fight still for the Appalachian Trail, where there's industry happening right outside these mountains. The only way they're going to fix it is by a buffer zone, which means communities, having clean communities. And but you take this into this other level with the pams-foundation, where you're looking at with these communities where the communities are not doing what Nancy talked about, where the guide is being paid off by a poacher, because the community is like, no, you will not do this, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly right. And
it took me a while to get there.
No. I think it's a little bit about community pride and community ownership of all of the issues. You want safety and you want security for your family, for your community, and sometimes that will extend to wildlife. And what the PAMS Foundation does, which I find so interesting and why I'm proud to be a supporter of theirs, is that, they started their work and the bulk of their work is in Tanzania, and they're looking at protected areas and what kind of management solutions, hence the name PAMS, protected area management solutions, they can have at the local level, at the community level, to protect wildlife. And one of the things that I think I've found as I've gotten to know the organization and work with them is, they've got this really important mission, right? So they want to protect wildlife. That's the essential component of what they do, especially elephants, giraffes, African wildlife, Tanzanian wildlife. And so they look at it from a very holistic way, which I think is so important, that they're working on the ground in the country to solve these complex wildlife problems. So on the one hand, you want to stop wildlife poaching, especially elephants for the ivory trade, and you want to combat the illegal trafficking of wildlife parts and products made from them. And in order to do that, you can have a multifaceted approach, right? You can work with governments, you can work with law enforcement authorities to try and stop the traders, to try and apprehend the poachers. But then you also have to really get down to a community level and say, how can we have environmental and conservation education for our communities, both for children, right, because we want them to grow up respecting wildlife and the value of live wildlife, but also the people in the communities. You know, you have to explain to these folks why there's a stake in protecting elephants from poachers or from trophy hunters when their farmers and their crops may be at risk from elephants. You really have to educate everyone in the community, and then also provide them with solutions. Right, it would be very easy for us to sit in the U.S. and say, well, you know, we need humane education and conservation education, and these folks should just not kill elephants. Well, you know, that's fine and well until you run the risk of human-elephant conflict affecting your community, your family. So what PAMS does is really this holistic approach where they're supporting communities and they're supporting the people in those communities, and as a byproduct of that, as an offshoot of that, they're also supporting conservation. So it's very much community-led, community-driven, community-focused. And when we talk about communities, we're really talking about people. And that's what it comes down to, right? Educating people, equipping people, park rangers, for example, giving them detection dogs to sniff out ivory at the airports, things like that.
Wow.
And also working on the poachers. And you know, you have all these complex layers, right? We've talked about this before, where you have the people who are funding these organized crime syndicates that are funding the poaching operations to acquire the ivory and ship the ivory off to the Middle East or to Asia. And that's sort of the very top level. But then you also have the people who are moving the ivory, the people who are poaching the elephants, and then you have all those other communities that sort of live around those areas, those oftentimes protected areas where the elephants are found. And so how do we engage those people? How do we make those people have a stake in wildlife conservation? And that's essentially, as I say, what pams-foundation does, is they try and make sure the people understand why wildlife is so important and give them real-world methods to live with wildlife, respect wildlife, and also say, you know, that this is our national heritage. It's something to be proud of. And, you know, don't support poachers. Don't give them comfort. Let people know when it's happening, so we can protect the wildlife and make more money from having live elephants through a vibrant tourism industry, than having them poached for their ivory.
Well, that's one thing I saw in Kenya for sure, was as communities realized that they could make money through tourism, the live animals became more important than the dead ones. Plus, I also want to point out that poachers are really connected to terrorism in a big way, and that people are very uncomfortable when there's poachers in their areas, because they don't just shoot animals, for one. They also shoot people. Not only that, in Kenya, when we lived there, poachers would come on the Somali border and set fires so that all the rangers would run to that side to put out the fires while they poached animals on the other side. And they really didn't care if they burned people's homes down. So there's a whole lot connected to poachers. And there's a whole lot of people who buy hunting permits that maybe they realize it, maybe they don't. I'm trying to be really fair here, that when they get a guide to take them out, their guide is a poacher. And that's
right.
what I got to say about that. So, well, I do. So when our government's going to take things case by case, which sounds to me like come on in with your bribes, because that's exactly what it is. It's come on in with your bribes. And they really, it's not about caring, so it has to go to the ground level. The people, you're quite right, when elephants come in and trash your crops because you don't have a defense system for that, that's what has to happen on the ground level to help those farmers, absolutely. But the money from tourism needs to filter down to them. A lot of times the tourism money doesn't filter down to where it needs to go.
If it's the wrong kind of tourism.
So the people can get a benefit from the tourism.
You
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's right. And look, I mean, there's often this sort of argument where it's either ecotourism or it's consumptive tourism, right? We're either having people watch animals, which I firmly believe, and I know you do as well, that animals will live many decades in the case of elephants, providing a sustainable source of ecotourism revenue for these communities for decades, generations.
Yeah.
Or we kill the animals and it's a one-off. But in order to take a true approach, forget conservation, just think economics. If you look at a country like Tanzania, and you think that in the 1970s there were more than 300,000 elephants in Tanzania, and with ivory trade and poaching and all of this consumptive use of elephants, by 3 or 4 years ago, you were down to about 43,000 elephants. So the trajectory from an economic perspective is not a good one, because the elephants are not going to be there to generate revenue in any way if we keep going in the way we have been going. So again, that's why you need these community-led approaches and ones that really benefit communities. And you said something interesting a minute ago, thinking about who's benefiting, right? Is it the poachers? Is it the terrorists? Who's really benefiting from this? And when I was in Tanzania recently, I was talking to an older gentleman who was telling some stories about this that I found fascinating. I mean, I was fully captivated for a very long time listening to his stories. And one of the stories he was telling me was sort of a general tale of, talking to somebody in a local community about the poachers and the poaching of elephants and the trade in ivory, and thinking about telling that individual, do you want to sit here and, you have very little money, and when it's hot, you're hot, and when it's raining, you're wet, and all of this, while some poacher is coming in and killing the elephants, taking the ivory and getting rich. That's not benefiting you. So as a community, you should not want those poachers anywhere near where you live. You shouldn't want them in your community. And, you start to change the way people think about this dynamic, and it really does change everything. And I think it also changes from the ground up. It was another interesting African adage that I heard at a meeting recently, where someone said, the only thing you build from the top down is digging a hole.
Yes.
Everything else.
That is an Africanism that I love. That's exactly it. That's and I miss Africa for that, because there's these like simplistic, wise, real, authentic, straight up. And I mean simplistic in like, hello, D to D, like Carlos Mencia used to say. It's the wakey, it's right in front of you. It's so true. And I think, it's getting, and the end, you think about villages in Africa, that is like one of the biggest examples of real community as well, and it's like, okay, to mobilize that and to change a community's mind. And so what I thought, going through pams-foundation.org, I just want to give everybody the website again, was really interesting to me, because there's education, of course there is, but this actually on-the-grounds training too, because this, like Nancy said a few things about the poachers and being connected to terrorists, and we've talked about this before too, and wildlife trafficking, illegal wildlife trafficking, which now our country has made pretty much not illegal by this. Just saying. So when you look at all of that, when people want to make big money off of a tusk, they go crazy, and it is not. There's hunters like here in this country that go out and they hunt their deer, they eat it, they may put the trophy on the wall. I'm not into that, but that's people's thing. This is a whole level of, there's danger in doing that. People get shot every year, every hunting season. Someone gets hurt. The animals sure get hurt, and some don't get shot the way they should, so they can have a clean, easy death. And then there's the trapping and all that. That's really painful and barbaric. But when you come to poachers, they are actually on this level of terrorists. Or just even the same thing as drug cartels. We are on this level of danger, right, Adam, with these kinds of people. And so communities, it actually behooves them to work together to not have them come into your community because just out of the level of the danger that they bring with them, the physical danger.
Yeah, that's right. And so I'll say two things about that concept. One is when thinking about the poachers, I'm always grateful that I still get to learn new things in this world and this business, but sometimes the things I learn are incredibly tragic and shocking. And one of the pictures I saw when I was there was an elephant, and the elephant had been poached, and the tusks were removed, but there was a huge gaping wound in the elephant's back. And it was that after they shot the elephant, rather than waste another bullet to kill the elephant, they cut its spine to kill it.
Oh,
and things like that. I think we often lose a sense of the brutality and the grotesqueness of what we're talking about when we're talking about killing elephants for the ivory trade. But when you talk about the violence and the danger of it all, one of the things that's so clear to me is that this is an incredibly dangerous and violent business. And for as much as, the Tanzanian authorities, and when I was talking about sort of, the only things you build from the top down are digging a hole, one of the things I've noticed in Tanzania is that because of groups like PAMS that are working on the ground and building from the ground up, so to speak, the Tanzanian government, I think, is starting to make some serious positive changes. It used to be one of the countries that we talked about in terms of corruption. We talked about in terms of the ivory trade. And, Nancy, you were talking about Kenya. And for so many years, it was Kenya versus Tanzania. Look how many elephants are poached in Kenya. Kenya doesn't allow hunting of wildlife. Look how many elephants we have in Tanzania. We do. And it was just this ongoing battle. And now they're starting to, I think, realize that they've got to get the poachers out of the country and the illegal ivory traders, and they are cracking down. And when they crack down, you're talking about arresting thousands of suspects, people involved in elephant poaching, and for the thousands of ivory tusks that are being retrieved and confiscated as a result of those arrests, you're also taking thousands of rounds of ammunition, thousands of firearms, out of these communities as well. And so, we used to have all of these pictures both in my mind, but also, on the screen and magazines and everything of these ivory warehouses where the seized ivory tusks are. But now, along with those pictures of ivory that's been confiscated and seized, you also have all the firearms along with it. And that's a truly dramatic picture, I think.
And that's what's so crazy about what's happening right now in this country is let's have billions of dollars to build a wall between Mexico and ourselves, but now we're going to let ivory be something that it's okay to bring in here. So we're going to really actually finance the terrorists while we build a wall to keep them out. Thank you very much for some real critical thinking and great planning.
Well, doesn't it open up that we become a distribution center, this country, like in a way, like aren't we? Are we the biggest consumer? I can't remember all the stats on all of it because it's just been crazy when you think about how big of like the amounts of killings and it's just the numbers that are just the plummeting from all these species. It's just been astounding. But America, I know the Asia and everything, they are always up at the top. But America, once we've opened this up, can't Asia funnel it, or they don't have that problem? They just go right to their country.
Well, yeah, but see, for me, this is the irony, right? Is that it seems as though Asia's moving in the right direction and stopping ivory importation, and they don't have a huge trophy hunting industry the way there is in the U.S. or Europe. So it really is sort of a tale of different directions, right? For many years we've talked about China being the largest consumer of wildlife around the world and the U.S. being second. And, I think that will probably continue for a very long time for a large number of reasons. But when it comes to trophy hunting and hunting elephants specifically, the U.S. is one of the real driving forces behind this. And so, it's obviously incumbent upon us to put pressure where we can. But yeah, there is this point of view that the more wildlife we import, the more we become a conduit for trafficking and commercializing wildlife. Because, as I said earlier, you bring a tusk in as a trophy, and some people will hang it on their wall and brag about it. But other people will bring it in as a trophy and then cut it up, carve it, sell it, try and, ship it overseas and commercialize that. And as soon as you do that and you start to generate some added value from commercializing elephants rather than just coveting them as trophies, you then get more poaching because people see a way to launder ivory, ship it around the world, claim it's a trophy hunting trophy, etc. So that's why this is particularly dangerous, I think.
Wow, this is crazy. I mean, it's just so sad. I just feel like deflated, but I feel like, not deflated when that we can't just sit back. It's time to go back and fight. And that's the thing. In any kind of world of, saving animals, habitats, parks, public spaces, rivers, the ocean, any kind of species, any kind of living thing, including our children, the fight is never over. And we just have to keep going and know you win a battle, you get to sleep for a day and get back up and do it again. And so just know that and just get in and do as much as you can. Sometimes not one person, that's why you have a community, because one person may not be able to tomorrow and somebody else is going to relieve your shift. And that's why you have to have a community. And that's the only way it works. And so whether it's a global community on social media and petitions and finance, or it is actually on the ground, all of that matters, every single one. And I think that sometimes we're in this virtual world where we can make a difference, which is great. Donate to places like pams-foundation.org. Be part of that. Spread their word. But also look at what you can do in your community immediately. I mean, in our community right now, we've got to think about this wall coming up, and that it is actually going to really, really hurt wildlife moving back and forth. Jefe, the jaguar ain't going to be able to come over again. So this migration, it hurts migration of wildlife.
It's going to hurt a lot more than migration.
So there's other things, but if we don't stand up as a community in southern Arizona and Texas, what are we doing? Just letting it all go away? This one little spark of wildlife coming back? So we have to do both. We have to go for even just our local community. Whether your plants are full of pesticides, even though they're EPA cleared, don't let them be there because you're going to kill your hummingbirds. Just saying. Plant native plants. There's every level.
We have to educate ourselves and others. That's your first step, is to actually find out and educate yourself so you don't believe everything. And then take steps. Like, it's like don't be one of the ones who throws a plastic bottle in the ocean. Apparently some people can't even swim outside the valley.
Boycott Snapple, who's going from glass bottles to plastic. You tell them on Facebook. You will not buy their processed chemicalized product anyway.
I think the consumer has a huge role to play, and probably now is more important than ever. The consumer is the most important person on earth. Don't buy it. Educate yourself and don't buy it.
Or Nestle.
Because as soon as the market dries up, companies go elsewhere for a different market. They have no choice. So if consumers would stand up and do their part, educate yourself, and don't do the things that ruin this planet for everybody, including yourself. So if nobody wants to buy ivory parts, the elephants will be safe. It's the long way around, but eventually we have to do it that way, as well as institute regulations and laws. We need to save them first, but in the long term, if we don't educate, then you can have as many laws as you want. The education is so critical.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as well, when you think about it in a holistic way, the way PAMS does, and I think the way you guys are talking about, we want to protect, as you were saying, the border. We want to make sure that animals have their natural migration routes. We want to make sure there are corridors between protected areas so that animals can move from one place to another, alleviate pressure, have diversity as they repopulate, etc. But you also have to, I think very nimbly about how you're approaching these issues. So, within your community, how are you protecting wild places, the environment, stopping pollution, protecting animals, all of these things. But then also thinking about what different communities actually need, right? Because if you're trying to sort of force the square peg in a round hole by telling communities what you think they need, it's never going to work. And one of the other things that I think is particularly interesting about Pam's work is the way they work with local communities on the human-elephant conflict issue. And, this is ironically important, and I choose those words very carefully because, we all know that there are people in Sri Lanka and in Vietnam or, anywhere around the world where there is the potential for conflict between humans and tigers, humans and bears, humans in my neighborhood, humans and raccoons, right? There's always that possibility. But interestingly, when you are on the ground working with local communities, working with intelligence-led law enforcement, making sure that you're doing right by elephants and stopping poaching, all of these issues, if you succeed, you might end up with an interesting problem in that fewer elephants are being poached, more elephants are around, therefore conflict increases, right? If you have more elephants and they're in with communities and they're not being poached, then you have more of them. And so one of the things that PAMS does that I think is incredibly important is work with local communities on what they need to make sure that they can be protective and respect the elephants and not want any kind of retaliatory killing from human-elephant conflict. And one of the ways they do that is with this incredibly elaborate system that's also incredibly simple of chili fencing, where they're having farmers grow chilies that are then dried and crushed, mixed with, I think, engine oil and spread on cloth. And that cloth is draped and tied to wooden fences around the farmland. And that in and of itself has proven incredibly effective in keeping elephants out. Elephants are not going to come through my farm because they're going to be dissuaded from doing so.
They're like, it's stinky.
Exactly. I'm not going anywhere near that. And you have to grow the right chilies and make sure they're the right power. And PAMS works with those communities and those farmers to make sure that's done right. And of course, again, you have this other amazing positive outcome. You're protecting the elephants, you're ensuring that human-elephant conflict is reduced, and you're supporting farmers, but then you're also economically supporting farmers because they're the ones that are growing some of the chili themselves. And then you have this sort of, for lack of a better phrase, a buyback program where you encourage farmers to devote some of their land to growing these chilies. You buy back a portion of the chilies to help make the chili cloth that prevent the elephant conflict. And it's beyond a win-win for these folks. So again,
that's smart.
It's so good. And the other thing that I think is so good about it is that it's replicable, right? So that if we have this knowledge, this community-led, community-driven knowledge, then you can apply it in other communities, in other countries where there's the potential for human-elephant conflict. This is a humane solution to an otherwise deadly problem, deadly both for people who are killed and for elephants who are killed. And so you really have to pay attention, I think, to what the community needs in order in order for them to accept elephants around them.
That's exactly it. You have everything comes from the community and the community working together and saying, okay, this is our problem. This is, the issues we're facing. This is what we want. And, and here comes the education of like, hey, elephants can eventually make you more money and sustainable. That's what sustainable, that word is, that's why sustainability and, the environment go hand in hand, because you want the environment to keep on giving, it's like the national parks. I know a superintendent at a meeting. We were, talking about the parks, and we were doing one of our tourism conversation or seminars, and she just said, we were talking about the visitation to her park and the community, and she just said, listen, this is like the I Love Lucy show when the chocolate factory's coming through. Yeah. She goes, we protected this place. People are coming here, and she was like, we have the chocolate factory, but you aren't saying, hello, we're here. You as a community have decided to just ignore this. like, majority, and they don't, not all of them, so I'm not, you know what I mean? It's just like, hello, we have the chocolate. They're moving. They're going to come to your town if you say hello, and you can be part of this. And they're coming because we preserved this special place.
Right.
And I mean, their conservation story is such an amazing thing. I just don't want to call out the town on this, but the town has grown and changed, and it's amazing to see this relationship, because now the park is so busy that the town is helping the park by saying, come here, because they can't even, there are times where this park has traffic backed up so much to get into the park that they're like, hello, go to the community and hang out there. And that's our job, is what we do, is trying to say, you need to do both things. You need to know the community as a traveler as well. And that's how you start to have the education of the consumer is going in. So when a consumer goes into, a traveler goes into the community in Tanzania that's saying, hey, look at our farms and look what we're doing with the tar. And I saw those photos up on pams-foundation.org. I was like, wow, that's so cool. When you think about people actually seeing that, they're going to go home and go, I saw an elephant, but like, look at this. You know what I mean? So I think that there's something in travelers that need to experience that too, and understand
and
community standing up. People will stand up with them and help the community.
Well, and the message is so good, is that you don't have to always kill something.
No.
There are solutions, and it doesn't have to be with toxic poisons or, with bullets, that there are solutions. Find out what the animal or insect or whatever it is that's bothering you doesn't like, and that's what you put out there.
Yeah.
And not something that's going to, harm the environment or your children, your family as well.
Right.
So, we don't need all these Monsanto poisons and things like that. Just had to get
exactly.
it in.
No. I think it's exactly right. And again, it's about talking to people on their own level, and I don't mean talking down to them on their own level in any kind of derogatory way. I mean thinking about what they need. And one of the ways it was explained to me was very simply, if you're a farmer and you have a family, do you want to sit up all night worried that an elephant is going to come through your crops? Do you want to sit there with a gun with pots and pans to slam together to try and scare the elephants away, or do you want to sleep at night? And if you want to have a nice night's sleep with your family and know that they're protected, you want to do something like chili fencing. And what's even more interesting about that is that one of the things that they used to do to scare off elephants was to make as much noise as possible and to slam, to light off firecrackers, everything they could to scare the elephants away. But all that did was make elephants associate scary, loud noises with people, and that makes them angry. So do you want to create angry elephants that want to trample people because they're scared and they're in this sort of dynamic, or do you want to have elephants that simply move along somewhere else because they don't like the smell of the chili fencing? So it's really, again, about thinking about those people. What do the people need, and how can we have a holistic, important solution that satisfies multiple interests at the same time? And I think PAMS is ingenious in the way they do that.
I love it.
That's so cool.
Before we run out of time, I do want to ask about giraffes. I know about over a year ago, maybe 2 years, I was like, you were on a show, and I think we were talking about elephants at the time, and I was just like, I'd seen something about giraffe, and I was like, oh my God, are giraffe in trouble? And you were like, yeah, they're the next one. And I was like, no. It's my favorite animal. Then I'll go, well, elephant's my favorite animal, so is an impala, and so is every single one of them. So I can't say it, but it just, they were these majestic, amazing creatures. I mean, and yet they can kick some ass. Seriously, they're amazing, amazing creatures to watch, and how they're part of the trees. They're part of how things get pruned at the top, and they're part of this amazing. They're just, you can't have Africa without giraffe. And I noticed at PAMS Foundation, that's part of their logo too, and they use elephants and giraffe. And I was like, wow, giraffe, someone's putting the spotlight on them. I think it's so important. Then I started reading further, and I went, oh my God, it is like in the last 10 years gone worse than I ever thought for giraffe. And I didn't know it had to do with meat, bush meat either.
Well,
I never
this is the thing. Yeah, see, this is the thing. People don't know about that, and I think it happens with so many animals, right? Elephants and rhinos and lions when they're trophy hunted, especially. You do have some of these sort of incredible species that are imperiled and that have a lot of media attention, captivating people around the world with what's going on, and then there are some species that sort of fly under the radar. And with giraffes, it's one of them. I mean, incredibly majestic, fundamentally docile, these beautiful animals, but they're declining, and they're declining rapidly over decades. There are fewer giraffes than there are elephants across Africa now in some places. So, you have this situation, and as is the case with so many animals, it's because they are being targeted, and that's what I was saying before, for commercialization. The meat, the hides, the hair, it's trying to kill these animals, these beautiful animals, for consumption, but not for personal consumption or sustainable consumption, but for commercial consumption, to sell those parts and products made from them. And as with everything else we've been talking about this evening, it's a situation where you have to really think about, how do we conserve these animals in the places where they live? What are the right projects that we can do to protect them? How can we have anti-poaching forces on the ground to protect them? And that's where you have to do the research and find out what's best for them, because you definitely don't want to be in a situation where all of a sudden we find out that the situation facing a species like giraffes is critical, and that's what happens if you don't have these groups on the ground working hard to protect them.
Yeah, this community part I think is so crucial, because I think sometimes when you see the numbers, there's this startleness, this like panic, and then the immediate reaction is to do the reactionary chaos control and fix things that way. And I understand that's necessary in some ways, but at the same time, it's not a long-term solution, and it's just going to happen again. And that's what I think happens. I mean, that's what I feel like. If you don't have the community, you have nothing at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
We can keep trading bills back and forth in different ways. Is it state? Is it federal? Is it this? Is it that? And it's going to go according to government leader. Whereas if a community is strong,
it's education.
And educated on something and knows what their purpose is, knows what their mission is, knows who they are. They all stand together for common good for their community, health, happiness, environmental cleanliness and abundance. When we look at that, then I feel that people can get through just about anything when the community is strong. And until then, we're just governed by everybody else, because we can sit and argue, are the poll boxes rigged? If we, all of that. And I think we should take every opportunity in everything we do, keep fighting, keep voting, keep doing petitions, keep doing everything. But the community, at the end of the day, is the only thing that's going to save anything, period. That's it. It's my final statement.
Agreed.
No, I mean
I've never heard her say a final anything.
No, that's it. I'm done now. I'm wiped out. Adam comes on the show, I get all excited. We're going to talk about wildlife, and then it's like an immediate rant. I'm barely even done introducing you, Adam, and I get into a rant. I wait every month just for you to come on the show, and it's like been sitting there waiting.
We saw so much in Africa, and it's so many years, and there's been great strides. There really has.
Yeah.
And it's encouraging, because recognizing the needs of a community is vastly better than a government coming in and telling a community what they will and will not do.
Yeah.
And I think historically that's happened almost everywhere, even in this country, where the government has come in and said, no, it's going to be this way. And now people are getting, well, wait a minute, hold on there. Maybe not. And, the idea of studying things, the amount of years it takes and money to study everything, leaving the community who lives there and knows about it out, it has been shown now that maybe this is where you start with the community. You find out what's necessary. Absolutely, a farmer doesn't want his crops ruined.
No.
Right.
That
makes total sense. How you handle it is where the education and how you're going to be smart about it comes in.
I'll go help them grow chilies.
And I think that's where people are finally getting to that point where they can say, okay, we're going to meet with the community and we're going to look at what the community needs. And it's not always going to go along with what the federal or state government or whatever wants.
No. Then that's our job to take care of it. We have to take ownership. We have to take responsibility and ownership.
And we're not talking about anarchy just so that other people don't get crazy about that. We're talking about looking at what your community needs and pushing for that.
Rage against the machine.
Well, I just know there's some people, like, as soon as you say we don't need this or we don't need that, they're like, oh, anarchists. Or
Yeah,
like,
no. Well, you can rage against the machine. Anyway,
in an intelligent way.
Adam, before you go, what is the best way to support PAMS Foundation? Other than everyone, pams-foundation.org. Is it mostly donations that they need? Social media tweets. What can we do?
Yeah, it's definitely both. I think, anybody who's willing to make a donation, I can certainly vouch for the work that they do. And as I say, it's this community conservation work that's so important. And the one thing with PAMS is, you know that they're on the ground and they're doing the hard work with their sleeves rolled up and really, making the connections, building partnerships and working with local communities. And, for everything we've discussed for the past 45 minutes, I think that's essential to making a real go of saving giraffes, saving elephants, saving Africa's wildlife. So if we can plow it into a group that we know has very low overhead and where the people are working hard on the ground, that's the most important thing. So I certainly encourage everyone to make a donation, and whatever it is, I can certainly attest to the fact that it's going to find its way into conservation and animal protection work on the ground where it's needed the most.
Okay, did you have a good time in Tanzania, though?
It was brilliant, really, just amazing people, and doing this amazing work. So yeah, it was restorative in that sense, just being surrounded by people who care so much and work so hard and do it every day. So yeah, it was great.
I know. I miss it out there. I mean, that area just. Oh yeah, the people, this resiliency and positivity out there is just so. Let's move forward. Let's do something. I learned something. Let's do it now. It's just such a good thing. So everyone, pams-foundation.org is the website, and you can keep up with Adam's interviews with us. Go to blendradioandtv.com. He's in our expert department, and we also feature his interviews in our Parks and Travel magazine, such as this one. If you go to nationalparktraveling.com, just type in Adam, and you'll find him on both websites. Or type in compassionate conservationist. I'll never forget that day saying the compassionate conservative. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, thank you so much, Adam. I'm just super excited to learn about this organization, PAMS Foundation, and good work that they're doing. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for having me. I look forward to next month.
Absolutely. Cool. You take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.